Hello and welcome everybody to part 5 now of the Perils in Paradise Hearthstone expansion review. Firstly, I'm gonna have to start out with some bad news. I've asked Blizzard, and the Octomasu's combo that we dreamed of last time does not actually work. It works a lot like Morg Artificer with like damage that goes to minions. It's like, for example, if you have a 3 health minions and you have a 5 attack Octomasu's, it will deal the 3 damage to the minion. It will octuple this, which will be like 24 damage that go nowhere, and then the last remaining 2 damage will go to your opponent's face. So if you have like Rush with always a bigger Jumango with Octomasu's, you will not be able to OTK your opponent, which is probably better for the game, but kind of disappointing because we dreamt it up last time. But yeah, we'll go a little bit more into newer cards, and we have the super sick legendary that we're going to spend the most of the time on today. Firstly, I'm going to have a 6 mana 6/7 package dealer, which is another ogre, but it's not from the ogre gang. After you draw a card, 50% chance to draw another, which then gives you 50% chance to draw another, and another, of course, like with diminishing returns. But I mean, it's a 6 mana 6/7. I don't think we have to talk about this card. This will never be played, but it's really, really fun flavor-wise. And then we have a new card, which is what I'm going to be spending most of the time on today. I think the rest of the cards that got revealed yesterday, I'm not going to be able to look at today because this card is really, really insane and really amazing. It's a Grifta, which is a throwback card to a 4 mana 4/5 from way back, which lets you look at 2 cards, and you give one to your opponent, and you keep one yourself. And I think you got to discover 2 cards. You get to discover 2 cards, and randomly you get one and your opponent gets one. So the card was never played because like it was always a 50-50 who gets the good card, who gets the bad card. But this card is new. It's 4 mana 4/5 Grifta, Trusted Vendor. So now he's back and he's a little bit more trusted. And he is a legendary neutral card, so it can go in any deck. Again, a 4 mana 4/5. Battlecry, discover an amazing amulet to give to both players. The enemy's is a phony version. So this time it's guaranteed that you get a good version and the other ones get a bad version. And now I'm going to give you all the amulets. They are 6 amulets and you just get to discover. So there's a 50% chance you get the one that you were looking for. All right. And the amulets are the following. The first one is they're all 1 mana, so I won't reiterate the mana cost every time I read out an amulet, but I will go and make sure that you know which ones go together. So first one, you have Amulet of Passion. Take control of an enemy minion until the end of your turn, which can be super effective, especially with Titans, because they have charge, essentially, right? You can immediately use their ability. You can't use it on Killiax, of course, but you could take it like, you could play it on a Yogg or something like this, you know? The opponent gets the same one. With the additional attacks, it has 1 attack this turn. So you take control of an opponent's minion, and it has 1 attack. Which, of course, the best cards to steal are like big rush minions, so this would be a downside. But since the best card in the game kind of has to steal like really sick like Titans, I think this is really still a good one that you give to a 1 opponent. So both of you get a 1 mana spell. Like the spell that your opponent gets is also 1 mana. So this one has some pretty interesting use, especially like if you only have a Grifta on board and your opponent has a Titan on board, you just play Grifta, you discover this, you immediately grab the Titan and you swing the board, and then you'd only have a 4/5 they can steal for a turn, and you can play around it, but they can't play around it. So this looks really interesting. Because for 1 mana you can just play it right away. It's like super powerful. So interesting one to discover. Then we have the Amulet of Tracking, which is get 3 random legendary cards. So that can include Titans, that can include spells, that can potentially include heroes, as Lord Jaraxxus is still in the game. And of course, you can get the Headless Horseman, the DK hero. And yeah, you get 3 random legendary cards. And what your opponent gets is get 3 random legendary cards, then transform them into commons. So your opponent gets 3 commons for 1 mana, and you get 3 random legendary cards. Of course, if you're like super value mirror and sometimes going late game, which really isn't the thing right now in Hearthstone, but I think the card's kind of cool. Especially like if I think about it, if I want to play like if I'm a rogue and I play against a warrior, and I just put Grifta in my deck because it's a good card, especially with like Shadow Step and whatnot. And the 1 mana cards are mega sit with Sonya. Like, just getting extra value, putting more stuff into my test could be really cool. Alright? So they get 3 commons, you get 3 legendaries. Then the next one is 1 mana summon a random 4-cost minion with Taunt. And the opponent is summon a random 4-cost minion with Taunt that cannot attack. And here I have to say, the difference really isn't that bad, right? Having a 4-cost minion with Taunt that can't attack is not that much worse than a 4-cost minion with Taunt. So, like, I feel like the difference between these 2 amulets, for the Amulet of Critter is what it's called, is really not that bad. So this is probably also not super impactful. Like, if I think about taking an opponent's minion for a turn, that seems like it can be mega impactful. 3 legendary cards, very situational, but can be super impactful. A random 4-cost minion with Taunt, I guess if I want to play for tempo, like maybe. So then we have 1 mana Amulet of Warding, which is deal 6 damage, and the opponent gets also deal 6 damage, but they have to deal it to a minion. So you get deal 6 damage that can go face. And if I think about this, like if I play Grifta and I Shadow Step this, I get this again. I get 2 Amulets of Warding that deal 6 damage. I play it twice with Sonya. I have 24 burst on 6 mana. That's pretty disgusting. So, yeah. I mean, the Amulets are pretty close. Like, deal 6 damage and deal 6 to a minion can be quite similar. Like, if you have to use it as removal anyway. Like, it is quite similar. But... yeah, of course, the possibility of burning somebody, especially with Sonya, is really, really interesting. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's like an option for you like to have like multiple Sonyas and just OTK somebody like super easily with this. Then you have the last one is Amulet of Energy, which is restore 12 to your hero. And the opponent gets restore 12 to your hero and then takes 6 damage. Alright? Which is super annoying because if you take 12 damage and then take 6, like, for example, if you're on 24, you go back to 24, you know? Or if you're, like, pretty high HP, this is actually a mega useless card. Especially if you're, like, let's say you're, like, a control deck, or you play against an aggro deck and they're beating you down and you really want to heal. Like, you of course, you choose the Amulet of Energy. You play the 4 mana 4/5 Grifta, and then for 1 mana you play Amulet of Energy, you restore 12 to your hero to like heal yourself out of range with the aggro deck, and since you're an aggro deck, they probably have more life than you, and they can't even play the energy, and then the energy amulet. And you just have like 5 mana 4/5 heal 12 to your hero. Super stabilizing card, like mega insane. Really interesting usage, and probably the card that you give to your opponent is really bad. And then the next one is Amulet of Mobility, and that one I think is truly crazy because like the downside of the other one is so big. So you get one that says draw 3 cards, and your opponent gets draw 3 cards and then discard 2 of them. And especially if you're not playing against an aggro deck, some decks have like really important cards. Like Rogue has Tez, like Druid right now has Marin, Warrior has Bran, so Reno decks always have Reno. Like the possibility just of discarding 2 of them and it being like the card that you need to win the game is really crazy. You get to draw 3 cards for 1 mana, and your opponent potentially has this card in their hand, which is, sure, it's 1 mana, draw 1 card, but you have to discard 2 as well for it, which is a huge cost. So you potentially have a super good card in 1 mana, draw 3, and they potentially have a card that just does hand space, right? They like have an extra card in their hand that they can never play, which is like really annoying sometimes for some decks because they just, your hand space is limited to 10. And this is another thing about the Grifta in general. If you play this in your deck, your opponent generally often will have to play with 8 cards instead of 9. Like, or technically at the end of their turn, they're going to have 8 cards instead of 9. So they get to play with kind of a card less, which is another really interesting thing about this card. Is like, as soon as it just is in people's deck, the amount of perceived hand space that people have to operate if they want to play around Grifta is 1 less. Just because of the possibility of like burning some really important cards. So I think this card has some additional like application there. And then you have Amulet of Strides, which is the last one. Reduce the cost of all cards in your hand by 1, and your opponent gets 1. Reduce the cost of all cards in your hand by 1, except for spells. So you get to reduce all your cards, and they get to reduce all their cards except for spells, which means it's much harder to OTK. Like, reducing minions, of course, is pretty cool. I think the big difference can be really big or really small. I mean, especially if you played against, if you have a lot of hand size, like you have with Rogue a lot when you generate random spells, reducing them is pretty cool. And you play against a more aggressive deck that maybe only has like two or 3 cards left in their hand, reducing everything by 1 except for spells really isn't that good. So you get like a really sick card. And so I think Grifta is mega amazing. Like, it has just so many upsides. The cards you get are amazing. You still get a 4 mana 4/5 body. Sometimes it's super good use. You can have it like offensive with deal 6 damage, defensive with 12, value by getting 3 random legendaries, or you can OTK by having like special setups. So I think this card will be seeing a lot of play, especially because the phony versions in a lot of situations can be really bad. Like, getting 3 random common cards is like, it's just hand space that is like garbage a lot of times. Or like dealing 6 to a minion for a control deck is like fine, but you know, or for an aggro deck might be like not that important. Or just taking, you know, 6 damage after healing 12 when you're full HP anyway is kind of useless. But yeah, also like the take control of an enemy minion for 1 mana until the end of turn. Like, when your opponent can't play around it with the Titans that they have, just think about stealing an Eono or something. So I think this card is mega amazing. Best card of the expansion so far, and I think it'll be just about in every deck. And I think we'll leave it at here because this card's like, it's the Turbonaut. I love it. It'll go in so many decks. It'll make for really interesting games, I think. Really looking forward to playing with this. Hope you have a great day. Thanks for sticking around through the video. Let me know which one is your favorite amulet in the comments below, and always remember that you're valuable and you matter, and I'll see you in the next video.